What do we got?
If you were surfing the net in the 2000s or just had a general
Frutiger Aero, the promised
presence around
future we
computers at
never
that
got.
time, chances are there are a
Bro,
couple
I was
things that
recording and it
stood
just
out.
it
You had a
didn't.
digital space
I don't know
that
why I
was
stopped
more or
recording, but
less full of
alright,
free
I already
real
seen this
estate.
though.
We finally had the capabilities to reach
I didn't see the
anywhere
whole
around the
video,
world
but
instantaneously, but we didn't have the temperament or experience to do it the way we do now. So there was this Wild West feeling too using computers, filled with ambiguity and uncertainty to where they were headed in the future.
by the way, bro, I love the aesthetic. If I didn't say that already, which I already
quite
did.
literally painting a picture for what they wanted the future of computers to look like. What you got was a bunch of glossy, photorealistic graphics of buttons and icons that resembled things from the real world.
Man, it was crazy, bro.
Artificial enough for you to know that you
like
had
I
just
said,
entered
if I could go
a
back
new
in time, I
one.
definitely
This
would,
unique
bro.
style has retrospectively been coined the term Frutiger Aero. And
Is
for
that
many, it is what
Frutiger
you'd call a typical
Aero?
case of nostalgia, particularly for those who were coming of age during the mid-2000s.
True.
It represents a time where computers and the internet were simpler, a perfect symbol of the innocence and blissful ignorance of what the internet was going to become.
That's so
If the
true
internet
though.
today was a metropolitan city, in the 2000s it was an underdeveloped field of wheat, full of so many amazing possibilities. And what if you could show that quite literally? And when you put it like that, it seems
That's
that Frutiger
crazy.
Aero isn't just an aesthetic, but rather a mindset. And for that reason, its place in the digital world and even validity has been brought to question. Yeah, I would not have expected for Frutiger Aero of all things to be controversial, but
I didn't know that.
For many people, it represents what things could have been. How we were
True.
essentially promised something.
Like I said before, little kid, I remember vividly going to the dentist, and it was literally like Frutiger Aero type beat. I remember
that we never received. And then you have the other side that disagrees with that premise entirely. And today we're going to talk about the origins of Frutiger Aero and why this contention even exists to begin with.
I don't know.
Frutiger Aero is a great example of the type of things that we see when observing decadology.
Like I said, study of decades.
Familiar, decadology is an unofficial term for the study of particular decades throughout history, primarily the 20th century, and the distinct traits we associate with them, and how they came to be. With the 70s, you think of disco and bell-bottoms, the 60s, hippies and psychedelic art, the gay 90s, athleticism, socialites and suffragettes, etc. These are not absolute and exclusive traits, of course, and there's much debate on when a decade culturally starts and ends. But decadology collectively chooses the traits that stand out the most, and
pandemic, end of 2010, start of 2020's COVID-19 pandemic. That's pretty crazy when you think about it, huh? So, iPhone launches, 2008 house crashing is crazy. Columbine, okay.
Define these eras throughout history. At the end of the day, it's all completely made up. But it does give quite a bit of insight into human behavior. The reason these decades look the way that they do is often influenced by the technological, financial, and political conditions of the time, and the Frutiger Aero fad of the 2000s is no exception. In fact, I would even argue that the motivations behind Frutiger Aero's existence strongly parallel those that were behind the distinct traits of the 1950s.
What?
Betty, how about some of those great hors d'oeuvres? Betty, don't rely on others to do your cooking, you lazy sack. That's when your pal HelloFresh comes in. Help you
oh my god. W video though, maybe?
Click on breakfast apply today.
When predictable 1950s aesthetic, we think of things that are clean,
interesting.
serene,
oh, okay.
simplistic. And now several decades later, we often think that the 1950s were these things, and that everything was just sunshine and rainbows all the time.
True.
It wasn't. Not even close. I don't think I have to tell you that a lot of super messed up stuff was happening in the 1950s.
Oh,
but since mass media was very strict at the time, especially television and music, those things were often not talked about, if at all. And because the 50s were a very long time ago, we only remember the positive aspects of that period. This is known as survivorship bias, and it is a contributing factor to the
Wait,
very
what was it,
distinct
like a
style
war
that
or
we
something?
see at this time. I say contributing factor because the reasons the 1950s looked like that are very nuanced, and the environment of the time did contribute to it. It was the end of World War II, and the United States had the geographic advantage of being basically the only developed country that wasn't completely left to ruins. The war effort also got the country out of the Depression, so they had both nice infrastructure and a lot of money. This gave them more time to focus on improving themselves, and initiatives from President Eisenhower to create things like highway systems allowed for people to explore unoccupied land much quicker. Much of this land was turned into suburbs, which looked quite clean since they were brand new. The uniform, cookie-cutter homes were
I don't see a problem
of the assembly line culture of the Industrial Revolution. They also symbolized familiarity and predictability. These circumstances created an ideal depiction of what living in America would now look like. Everyone could just go and start new, wealthier, better, simpler lives and raise their nuclear families. This ambition was flaunted and embellished in the artwork of the time, just like how the designs and color palettes were clean, simple, and predictable.
Oh, it's like the retro futuristic type.
So was the American dream. We then saw this kind of repeat itself in the 1990s. The Cold War was now over. A recession indirectly brought interest rates.
This is crazy after the wars.
To record low
good
levels,
stuff, like, you know, like
seen throughout the decade.
Like bang, 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 bang.
Once again, had more money and less worry.
Exactly.
Just
see?
like cars on the highway looking for unexplored land, those with computers were now on the digital superhighway looking for unexplored parts of a new technology called the internet. And again, you would then start to see this faux optimism, idealized depiction of
So is that why? I mean, interesting. So many people say the 90s is like the best era, but
were not that good.
I wasn't there,
because
so
of Moore's law, computers were going to get better and more powerful. People just had to wait for it. And that was a big component of this attitude. It's at this time where you start to see a lot of CGI, 3D graphics. That's when Frutiger Aero starts to enter the picture. By the 2000s, machine capability had exponentially improved, and computers were much more accessible to everyday people. Once again, these circumstances were reflected in the aesthetics of the time. This was the most apparent in the year 2000, with the release of macOS 10 and their new cutting-edge interface design known as Agua.
Agua? Brother. By the way, Steve Jobs, bro, literally created a whole new category, and he literally carried the whole decade.
This was then
we would never see another Steve Jobs ever. He's actually the GOAT, I'm not gonna lie.
Say goodbye to the archaic, dull look of the 90s. Say hello to the embossed, gradient buttons.
Cinema.
They are appealing to look at. You could almost reach out and grab them.
Exactly.
Subsequently, this became a huge aesthetic trend throughout the decade. The perfect embodiment of the new millennium. Following the release of XP, Microsoft wanted to take their OS to the next level, and right after the release of Windows XP, it was already being discussed that the next revolutionary version of Windows was in the works. Their name for it? Longhorn. Longhorn's development history is quite interesting, because when you start looking at Microsoft's overall objectives for the project, you quickly start to see a lot of things, well, becoming disorganized. For instance, Longhorn was initially just meant to be an interim release of Windows, basically just a small update to Windows XP, scheduled to be released very soon after. This would give them a little buffer to release a truly ambitious project, codenamed Windows Blackcomb, which was scheduled to come out in 2002. But as you can imagine, having 3 versions of Windows come out back-to-back in about 1 year was going to be a lot for Microsoft. So they decided to just make Longhorn. It assumed all the planned features for the now disbanded Blackcomb and planned to be the big revolutionary OS of the century. What Windows 95 did to Windows 3.1, Longhorn was going to do to XP. In many respects, it wasn't just going to be an OS. It would be like interacting with real-life objects, but on a screen, effectively eliminating the need to understand the intricacies of knowing how to use a computer, outside of just the click of a mouse. It was going to be what Microsoft Bob tried to be, but this time with much more ability and, most importantly, better graphics. In fact, a big part of Longhorn's marketing focused on
I see the
operating
vision.
system
I see the
design.
vision.
They called this design Aero. A very common typeface called Frutiger was used on many computers at this time. This, of course, being created by Swiss designer Adrian Frutiger. With these distinct styles often complementing each other in this period, you probably now understand where the term Frutiger Aero comes from. But obviously, it was coined retrospectively. At the time, it was simply Aero, particularly when referring to the designs Microsoft made for Longhorn. Much like how its scheduling was all over the place, Microsoft's vision for Longhorn was also all over the place. They had many different design concepts for the OS that they showcased as previews, but these didn't exactly match the builds of the OS that were leaked, which really just looked like XP with a slightly different look. Not to mention they had in mind all the features they kept adding onto the OS, like a new security.
Wasn't there like a wallpaper that was like a lily, like a lake or something? It was like interactive and shit. Nah, there's no way.
A search system quite similar.
Is that a thing? Because I swear I vividly remember.
And a whole new storage system. This would require a ton of under-the-hood changes with the OS, and so people were skeptical that Microsoft was going to be able to even meet their deadline. And ultimately, they were right. Longhorn's release date kept getting postponed, and the code that made up the OS kept getting more and more tangled and convoluted. Things just felt bloated. It was an entire mess. This is what happens when you try to design an OS with next to no tangible plan. Even if the idea was good, the execution was terrible.
Man, shout out to those
that Longhorn was canceled completely
programmers.
In 2004. They essentially had to start from scratch at this point. They decided to only keep a handful of these features, the Aero theme being one of them. And keep in mind, it had already been nearly 5 years since a new Windows had been released. For the sake of time, they had to really water these features down. So 2 years later, we got Windows Vista, which was infamously unstable and
I don't think that was one of the best ones.
Naturally, people were very upset. Instead of Longhorn, we got this? And that enthusiasm for Frutiger Aero came from these promises from Longhorn, which showed a much more interactive 3D environment. It looks less like a computer and more like a place, and only little bits and pieces of that ended up actually appearing in the finished product. It just wasn't the future people were expecting. But you know, perhaps it was just the wrong time, because this trend for Aero-style skeuomorphism did not stop at Windows Vista. It started to appear on websites, computer programs, television, commercials, basically every digital medium possible. We could make this the future everywhere. I mean, look at this design for old YouTube. So groovy. I mean...
Somewhat. Actually, I was gonna say somewhat better than now, but nah.
I mean,
this YouTube clears. My God, my ears.
It's my opinion that Frutiger Aero would have its peak in around 2009, which would, not coincidentally, be the same year as the release of Mac OS X Snow Leopard. I mean, just look at this
Giga. Oh my God.
It looks so good you kind of want to lick it. Steve Jobs' words, not mine. But wait a minute. One is Frutiger Aero and one is Agua. One made by Microsoft, one by Apple. Agua focused more on reflective, abstract textures, literally like tiny water droplets. Aero focused more on combining these photorealistic graphics that simulated interacting with real-life objects.
That's literally Aqua.
These are not the same thing, but they are similar. Where do you draw the line? Well, some would argue that you don't. Heck, these same people are wondering, is this even a thing? Does Frutiger Aero actually represent anything that we just talked about? Or is it—
Yes, it does, bro. I mean, Frutiger Aero represents a whole decade. Like, bro, it's literally like, I don't know how to explain it. You just gotta see it, you
just
know?
an arbitrary term that people have added to a much more broad concept that already encompasses all these attitudes, such as skeuomorphism. Well,
the heck is that?
Nicola certainly thinks so in his video on Frutiger Aero. And oh, JJ, I see you garnered some discussion here. I just had an idea. You should make a video about Technicolor. I think the world is ready for a very nuanced take on that subject. Who knows? Could be missing out. In this video, JJ argues that this is just a meaningless term indirectly conceived from nostalgia that shows up from people coming of age every 20 years or so.
Brother.
There's definitely a take I never pictured having, but it was interesting to hear, especially from someone a whole different generation than me.
Brother, you will never, I'm telling you this right now, you will never make me disbelieve the fact that Frutiger Aero is not real. You'll never, you can never do it.
I decided to have a talk with him.
Hey man, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Right now I'm playing a little game called How Many
It's
Cables Can One
real.
Outlet Handle Without
If
Breaking?
that's the case, if it's not real, then the whole 90s aesthetic wasn't real either. Boom, got him. Boom. Next.
The winner
Boom.
keeps their security deposit.
I wanted to explore the mind of somebody.
That means
who
your
was
childhood
already an
isn't
adult
real.
by the time Frutiger Aero had become a thing, and shares no sentimental value towards it, or really any nostalgia.
Well, no
for
shit, because his childhood was in fucking the
the early
90s
internet, for that matter.
or
My name is
80s.
JJ
Who
McCullough,
knows?
And I'm a YouTuber based out of Vancouver, Canada.
If Frutiger Aero doesn't
Classic
represent
Canadian.
computer culture of the 2000s, what do you think does?
I think it does represent the computer
Bro,
nostalgia
okay.
of that era in a way. I just think that we should probably sort of define it in a much sort of like broader term, right? So I feel like a lot of the Zoomers have this idea that sort of computer aesthetics of sort of the early 2000s were like fundamentally defined by a kind of like nexus of like water imagery and nature imagery. And I just think that the phenomenon is not that precise. But then you also saw a preponderance of all sorts of other imagery. You know, you saw things like Toy
This has to
Story
be rage
or
bait.
Terminator or Jurassic Park, right? Like computer generated graphics were kind of everywhere, and they were representing all sorts of different things. You know, I think we can sort of fetishize sort of the Frutiger Aero type stuff as being perhaps more representative of overall sort of computer generated aesthetics than they necessarily were.
What
No.
are some examples of
Wrong.
mid-2000s computer culture that you think kind of diverts from that style that makes it not as precise for that time period?
What were sort of the iconic Pixar films of that era? Can we remember?
I'm trying to think. Ratatouille, right? That was like...
Yeah, like Ratatouille, like is
Cars.
Ratatouille Frutiger Aero? Like I don't think so. Like it's very iconic.
That's fair.
I
The thing
mean,
with
brother, that's a fucking movie. We're talking about computers
Frutiger
here.
Aero is that it's
Like, huh?
a theory first, and then people are trying to find examples to kind of fit into the theory. But you
He's
see
just
a few
wrong.
very
He's
sort of
wrong.
Stock images that are not really from anything specific that people recognize.
It's rage bait. It's classic rage bait. He's wrong, and he knows it. He knows it. He's farming. He's farming.
I'm tired of
He's
seeing
farming.
these videos about Frutiger Aero that just keep citing the exact same like 5 pictures and
I
saying,
mean,
like,
bro.
oh, doesn't this prove that this thing exists?
Emailing my...
He wasn't there to experience it. He was there to experience it when he was in the 90s, probably 80s. I don't know. Who knows? He didn't grow up experiencing it. And just because you don't grow up experiencing it doesn't mean it's not real.
graphic design.
That makes sense.
When I had initially watched JJ's video, my main takeaway from it was that nostalgia for Frutiger Aero was somewhat based on the premise that the internet is now bad, and that was the reason it disappeared. But then I learned that his stance went much deeper than that.
Do you see the internet now as less exciting than it was back then?
I mean, like, I think the aesthetics of the internet are objectively better. Like, I'm sort of sentimental for how the internet was structured versus now, like sort of the pre-social media internet. But, you know, I'm not really nostalgic about the aesthetics. Like, it was just a case that, like, graphics were uglier. They looked worse, you know. It was much harder to get, like, nice high-resolution photographs and...
Well, no shit. Okay, obviously graphics were worse back then. Like, anybody could say that and then be right. But just because it's something, just because it was bad is what made it nostalgic, bro. I mean, like, what?
You know, videos were non-existent.
Something can be bad and it could be,
and they took
it
forever
could
to
still be
load.
nostalgic.
You know, I remember a very common cliche of sort of the early internet was you'd load up some website and I think there's even a joke about this on The Simpsons, and like just everything is just animated GIFs everywhere. It's like, you know, the dancing baby from Ally McBeal, and you've got like some rotating 3D smiley face, and just like a lot of just kind of like corny stuff like that. And these graphics were all very ugly, and so I'm like, maybe that's a vibe unto itself, but it's not one that's necessarily appealing to me.
Overall, I think JJ's video was insightful. While I don't exactly agree that the practice of creating labels like Frutiger Aero is inherently groundless, I do agree with the notion that it is okay to be nostalgic of things just as long as you also remember them as they were.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that how... Okay, think about it like this, right? You're nostalgic about Minecraft. Let's take Minecraft for an example. Obviously, the person who played Minecraft back then, where it was literally minimum, like you can say Minecraft now is better because of the textures, the gameplay, just the feel, the way it ran, but people are still gonna love the nostalgia of how Minecraft was back then, you know, just because it's nostalgic, because that's what nostalgia does to you, bro. It takes away all the bad, you know, all the bad stuff that you forgot, and it replaces it with good memories, bro. That's literally all of it. That's all it is. And I don't think it's bad to have nostalgia, but you saying like, oh, but you better remember how bad it was. I mean, don't you remember Minecraft couldn't run on my PC? Like, bro, like really, bro?
That the
like,
sort of grim, cynical tone that sort
like,
of
I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but like, bro,
things like AI and dead internet theory certainly contributed to the disappearance of Frutiger Aero, but I don't think it's telling the full story. As JJ said, part of it is simply that trends just come and go, just like how disco isn't a thing anymore. Neither is Frutiger Aero. And I think a big part of it is people just quite literally got sick of it.
Disco's...
And the
what? Wait, what do you say? Disco's not...
Go, just like how disco said, part of it is simply that trends just come and go.
I mean, it's not a trend, though.
Just like how disco isn't a thing anymore, neither is Frutiger Aero.
I mean, I think people, like... I think people still not, like, disco's not alive. I mean, it's still certainly somewhat alive, but, like, to say that it's not a thing anymore is kind of crazy, too.
And I think a big part of it is people just quite literally got sick of it, and the environment that enabled that trend to exist to its full potential could now be used for something else. Why were the 1960s so colorful and psychedelic? Obviously, colorful things existed before, but the 60s took it to a whole other level, to the point where it's a trait that particularly stands out with that decade. Well, color TV finally became a thing, which made it easier to create media that was in color. In fact, 1967 was the first year where more color movies were made than black and white. With this new capability in their hands, they made the most out of it. There's a common hyperbolic joke that's tossed around among historians that in the 60s, everything was just black and white, and then one day people woke up and everything was in color. And in a less extreme, more spiritual sense, this is sort of true. There is quite literally a term for this phenomenon, the summer of love, because the political, technological, and financial circumstances of the time had this crazy social change occur over the course of just a summer. But eventually, color TV became so normal, people just got tired of all the colorful crap, and things got much more dull and gritty looking in the 70s and 80s. Frutiger Aero had the same fate, but with computers. CGI was getting so easy and so good, people finally had the chance to really take it to great levels, and so they did. Skeuomorphism was also a great way to take an intimidating, abstract concept like a computer interface and transform it into something that resembles the real world, so that non-tech savvy people could understand how to use them better. But once CGI got so good, and once people got so used to how computers worked, the skeuomorphism style was no longer needed, and was starting to get old. So, something like... I
mean, I just think things just evolve, you know? Just... things evolve.
design came in its place. The
That's
digital
not bad.
world
It's
could
not
afford
bad.
to be more abstract, and it was a fresher look. But now we're reaching the point that people are getting sick of this flat look and further feel that it is
Yeah,
also
I mean, like,
indicative
brother, like, everything's just like, well, I don't know, man.
of the current dull, bot-filled climate of the digital world.
Everything's gonna look so, like he just said, everything's gonna look, we're gonna get tired of the simplicity of things, and everything literally looks like AI generated. Like,
A monotone, uninspired design for a monotone, uninspired space. And I do think the best way to understand how and why trends
and Frutiger Aero literally had character to it. That's the whole thing. It had a character. It had livelihood to the actual, like, designs to it. Nowadays, everything, like he just said, it's just dead. It's just bots. Like, it's AI. It's AI.
is by analyzing it at all angles. And sometimes the overclassification of things is part of that. It's simply human to put a label on everything because we're trying to make sense of everything. It is part of our nature to eliminate any form of ambiguity. The overcategorization of things is something we've seen many times throughout history. In fact, the movie A Hard Day's Night from 1964 even jokes about this when discussing similar yet different music subcultures.
Are you a mod or a rocker?
No, I'm a mocker.
Whether these terms had any contemporary practical use or were coined retrospectively,
Got him.
that human condition is still there. It could very well be an inherent byproduct of the time as well. A comment on JJ's video pointed out that creating names like Frutiger Aero comes from the need to use keywords in order to search for specific things online, and I do think that's part of it. Perhaps by taking into account all these things and classifying them to the best of our ability, we can make the most sense of them and therefore use them to our advantage. Maybe this is how we can create that future that we saw with Frutiger Aero. And I don't think this is the end of Frutiger Aero either. With the rise of augmented reality, we are going to essentially come full circle and, in this realm, introduce 3D style graphics. Because not only will it make this new technology easier to understand, it is quite literally designed to take you to a cleaner, more idealized world.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, if you had to choose between mods or rockers, sometimes it's okay to just be a mocker. Oh, and you should support me on Patreon as well. Patreon, and Bell Bottoms, the 60s.
Okay, this was a year ago. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, good video, W video. Shout out to the guy that made this. I think it's good to just disagree on some things, maybe. Or not even him, the other guy that he had on. But anyways, I just think that some of his points, not him, but the other guy's points that he brought on, just, he was rage baiting. I'm not gonna lie. Honestly. Yeah, that's what I think though. Let's keep it moving though.